Canadians cannot afford another painful, costly, chaotic, and corrupt year of Justin Trudeau. He will not quit. He must be fired.
We're not focused on culture wars, on complaining that everything is broken, that, going off on strange tangents. That's not the way to connect with Canadians. That's not the way to deliver what Canadians are asking for.
You know who's on your side when you're in a fight. New Democrats will always be on the side of workers. Pierre Poilievre will never be seen on a picket line. Justin Trudeau will never be seen on a picket line. We're here because we care.
Canada's political leaders may have just spent the summer back in their constituencies, but they'll soon be hitting the ground running for a marathon political push to the end of the year, starting with 2 federal by-elections in 2 weeks, seats vacated respectively by Winnipeg NDP MP Daniel Blakey and in Montreal, former Liberal Justice Minister David Lametti. There's crucial seats in a tight minority House. This time last year, Angus Reid showed a 14-point lead for the Conservatives, while Abacus data had them 12 points up. As of June, that lead, it had ballooned, with Angus Reid posting a 21-point lead for the Tories and Abacus data posting a 19-point lead. The latest data from Abacus shows that ticked down slightly to 17 points for the Conservatives. With me now to unpack where things head from here in Vancouver, Shachi Kurl, the president of the Angus Reid Institute, and in studio in Ottawa here, David Coletto, CEO of Abacus Data. Hi, guys. Good to see you. I was just saying before we went to air to David, we convened exactly 2 months ago after the big by-election loss in Toronto, surprising by-election loss for the Liberals, what was going to happen over the summer. Did anything change in a meaningful way, David?
No,
okay.
In terms of public opinion, right? When you ask Canadians, is the country headed in the right direction? Literally the exact same number, 25% say yes, 60 plus say no. Feelings about the Prime Minister, government's approval rating, and vote intention, while we see variable up and down 1-2 points, the fundamental story is still the same. The Conservatives are ahead in almost every part of this country. They're leading across almost every demographic, and that is exactly what it was in June when we last spoke.
Shachi, same question to you. Are you seeing the same thing out there as well?
I am, Vassy. I'm seeing, in terms of broad brushstrokes, exactly the same as what David is seeing, give or take a couple points. But statistically, this has been the summer of the want. Nothing has changed one way or the other after all that, after all those barbecues, after all those clips, after all those ads. Nothing. It's like that episode of The West Wing where it's a midterm election and nothing changes. That's basically what we're looking at right now, and we'll have data out tomorrow that shows that trend, such that it is the trend of nothingness, still on track.
What can we take, though? I like the went, by the way. What can we take, David, from the strategies employed over the summer? And let's start with the Liberals, where we did see, I would say, after covering the last few summers, reduced visibility for the Prime Minister. And when he was visible, it was in a very controlled setting, like less open-ended media press conferences, for example, much more sort of photo ops in the month of August, but not a huge presence compared, I think, relative to previous summers.
Yeah, well, I think what the Liberals know from their polling, if they're doing any, or at least the public polls, is that the Prime Minister, how people feel about the Prime Minister, is directly correlated to how then they might vote or how they feel about the government. You can't separate the two. And so maybe this was a moment for him to sort of step back, not into the shadows and out of the spotlight, but maybe just less so, less saturated, attention towards him, and maybe give people an opportunity to recalibrate, or to, if distance makes the heart grow fonder, maybe, that doesn't seem to have worked at all, because at the fundamental level, all of the things that people said they felt anxious about still exist today, right? Interest rates might be starting to come down maybe tomorrow again. That doesn't solve the cost of living crisis people are feeling. It doesn't solve the healthcare scarcity problem people are feeling. And that's a much longer term effect. But at the end of the day, you've got a Prime Minister and a government that's been in office for over 8 years. That's still the fundamental problem for people. So they're looking for change of outcomes, and the easy place to look is to change the political leadership. And you take the Prime Minister out of the spotlight, he's still the Prime Minister, and people know that.
I've been wondering that throughout the summer, because particularly when you speak with Liberals, Shachi, they have certainly pinned a certain degree of hope on the prospect for a better economic situation in particular, right? That changes the calculation around cost of living, which has been such a dominant anxiety and issue for Canadians over the last 2 years. So if interest rates do abate to a greater degree, if inflation stays low, if the economy maintains a soft landing and potentially even starts to grow, I think their calculation is people will at that point dislike Prime Minister Trudeau less and see Poilievre for what he is, according to the Liberals, and dislike him more. Do you think that that is possible?
Anything is possible. But I think, cast your mind to a reality where the cost of living crisis had never happened, that interest rates had been where they were pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, that all of the things that turned the national mood as sour as it has over the last 2 years had not occurred, you'd still have a Liberal Party going into next year, into its 10th year in government, trying to make the case for why it deserves a fourth term. And so even if things do improve, and by the way, I think you'll see tomorrow that the Prime Minister's personal approval has actually ticked up a few points, nothing to make any massive difference. But yes, maybe hiding him most of the summer did help a little. But at the end of the day, it was always going to be a challenge. There is a longevity and a sell-by date and a best-before date that hits any government. And it was always going to be a challenge to make the case to extend that best-before date for the federal Liberals. Unless you see a real wholesale change in the economic picture, and not the macroeconomic picture, right, but the microeconomic picture, the home economic picture, where it's not just the data that shows that things are getting better, but that people feel in their spending power, in the level of stress that they're feeling around their mortgages, that things are truly getting better. Will that alleviate some of the challenge? Yes. But they're still, at best, they're back to an even playing field as opposed to a place of advantage.
Is there any data point right now, David, that gives you some insight into what a vulnerability for the Conservatives would be? I can imagine holding this type of lead for another year inherently has some challenges, but is there a specific vulnerability that you would be looking to?
I mean, I think there's two. One is there are still a sizable number of Canadians who don't really have a clear sense of who Pierre Poilievre is, right? They may feel that they kind of know him, they've seen him, but they don't really, I don't think, have thought of him as Prime Minister and what that means. Now, is that enough to close the gap of a 20-point lead? Maybe not, but there's something there. But perhaps more important, I think, is all of the relatively popular things the Liberals have done, perhaps under the auspices of the NDP pushing them there, dental care, as an example. The fear of losing those things, I don't think has necessarily been litigated yet. And if you are, as Shachi says, if you are a government going to be in your 10th year, you aren't going to win on your own coattails. You're going to win because people fundamentally would rather have the devil they know than the devil that they don't. And the devil they don't, for Conservatives, is typically the fear of social conservative issues being in the forefront, fear of losing national programs. And I think as much as Canadians are aching for political change, there's still a defensiveness to them. They don't want to lose the things they have. And so I think that's the opportunity for the Liberals, is to continue to make the case that the Canada that may not be perfect today, and you heard the Prime Minister say it, we don't want to be the ones who complain all the time that Canada's broken. True, but on the other hand, what he has, I think, failed to do is even admit that there are things that aren't working well and that his plan will actually be the better one to fix them than whatever the Conservatives are offering.
David mentioned briefly there the NDP, and I wanted to conclude, particularly, Shachi, as we look ahead to the by-elections in both Manitoba, but also in Montreal, where the NDP would be the ones likely, or the Bloc, but likely the NDP to challenge the Liberals there. It's a very, very safe Liberal seat, long-held seat. If they were to lose that one, it would be a big deal. Matthew Green, one of the NDP MPs today, telling the Canadian press he's considering or he would like to have a conversation in caucus about the deal with the Liberals, that supply and confidence deal, and whether it's worth revisiting. Your sense of where the NDP fits into all of this?
You know, the NDP, I think, for their attempts just in this last week and through Labor Day to try to push back on being the natural party that defends and stands up for union members, is at risk of having its lunch eaten on all sides. If you're the Liberals going into what feels like certain disaster, you're actually going to pivot to NDP voters and say, never mind the NDP. If you want to stop Pierre Poilievre, vote for us. And then you've got the Conservatives making inroads and doing, you know, frankly, better than they should be with union card carrying members, especially those in private sector unions. The NDP, sure, could theoretically gain some traction or some leverage from pulling out of that confidence and supply agreement now, although the natural question to a lot of people will be like, well, that's great that you're doing it now. Where were you a year ago? Where were you 18 months ago? Where were you after 2021, where you could have actually made more impact by deciding whether the Liberals lived or died, vote after vote, policy position after policy position. So it's a little bit of the, well, yeah, we quit, but maybe we're quitting just as we know we might get fired. And that, of course, is the liability for the NDP in pulling out of the CASA now or over the next 6 months or so.
I love that we're using the acronym. It's been around for so long now. Okay.
We're back.
Yeah, we're back. Thanks, everyone.